They say blood is thicker than water. But what happens when your own blood tries to steal the one thing that makes you valuable? I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones plotting your destruction. My husband took everything in the divorce, or so he thought. He had no idea what he was really taking, and what happened next destroyed him in ways he never saw coming. But before I get to that shocking revelation, before I tell you how karma delivered justice so perfectly it felt like divine intervention, I need you to understand how I got here. Picture this. New Year's Eve, the night everyone celebrates new beginnings, and I'm completely alone in a cramped apartment while my entire family parties without me at their mansion. I couldn't believe they'd actually banned me from their celebration, that they'd look at my empty chair and feel nothing. The betrayal wasn't just the exclusion. It was the calculated cruelty behind it. The systematic erasure designed to punish me for refusing to surrender something they had no right to take. They thought they'd won, thought they'd broken me into compliance, thought I'd just disappear quietly like a good little daughter who knows her place. But at exactly midnight, while they were clinking champagne glasses and congratulating themselves on their perfect family image, my phone started ringing. It was my brother, panic bleeding through every word, demanding to know what I'd done because our father wasn't breathing right, after seeing the news. The news? Oh, just that my company had gone public with a $2.3 billion valuation, and attached to that announcement was an expose that would burn their entire world to ashes. I'd exposed everything, the theft, the manipulation, the fraud they'd disguised as family business, with receipts so damning that no amount of charm or old money connections could save them. See, they made one critical mistake. They underestimated the invisible daughter, the one they treated like a decorative afterthought whose only value was staying quiet and making them look good. They didn't realize that while they were busy erasing me from family photos and excluding me from their celebrations, I was documenting every lie, protecting every innovation, and building a legal fortress they couldn't penetrate. The infidelity wasn't romantic. It was intellectual, professional, a betrayal that cut deeper than any affair because it came from the people who were supposed to celebrate my success, not steal it for themselves. What you're about to hear isn't just a revenge story, though there's plenty of payback to satisfy anyone who's ever been backstabbed by family. This is about what happens when you choose dignity over approval, when you refuse to disappear to maintain someone else's peace, when you fight back with truth instead of tears. This is about the daughter they tried to humiliate into silence who became a billionaire while exposing their corruption, about karma delivered with precision and documented proof, about the shocking moment when the golden boy brother melted down on social media trying to deny evidence the entire internet could verify. So let me take you back 3 years, to before the IPO and the expose, and the public implosion. Let me show you exactly how a family built on old money and older lies tried to steal my future, how I protected myself when I realized blood meant nothing against their ambition, and how I turned their exclusion into the greatest gift they never meant to give me, freedom. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your self-worth, exposing the truth, and building something so undeniably yours that they can never take credit again. And trust me, what they took in the end wasn't victory. It was the rope they used to hang themselves. You know what hurts more than being hated? Being erased. I'm Charlotte Carter, and I spent New Year's Eve completely alone in a cramped studio apartment in Boston while my entire family celebrated at our estate in Newport. The betrayal wasn't just about being excluded. It was about being made invisible, like I'd never existed at all. Every laugh, every champagne toast, every countdown happened without me, and the worst part? Nobody even pretended to care. I stared at my phone watching their Instagram stories, seeing Ryan's perfect smile, Mom's elegant dress, Dad's proud expression as he gave his annual speech, and I felt something crack inside my chest. The humiliation was suffocating, because this wasn't some random party. This was tradition, our family's sacred ritual we'd done for 29 years. I couldn't believe they'd actually gone through with it, that they'd look at that empty chair at dinner and feel nothing. My own mother had called me 3 days before, and said, with that cold, measured tone she uses when she wants to sound reasonable, "Charlotte, darling, perhaps it's best if you sit this one out. You've been causing tension, and we'd like to keep things pleasant. Pleasant. Like I was a stain on their perfect evening. Like my presence was the problem, and not the fact that they'd backstabbed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I sat there in my tiny apartment with cheap takeout and a bottle of wine I couldn't even enjoy, feeling my dignity crumble with every notification. The truth was starting to surface in my mind. This wasn't about one argument or one disagreement. This was punishment, calculated and cruel, designed to make me feel small and powerless. They wanted me to know my place, to understand that family drama only matters when it inconveniences them, and that my self-worth didn't factor into their perfect world. I watched the clock tick toward midnight, alone, shamed, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me could treat me like I was disposable. But here's what they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly imagined as they clinked their crystal glasses and laughed about whatever shallow gossip was entertaining them that night. While I sat in that studio feeling crushed and forgotten, something else was happening, something that would shatter their perfect little universe into a million irreparable pieces. At exactly 12:01 a.m., my phone started ringing, and it wasn't to wish me Happy New Year. It was Ryan, and his voice was shaking in a way I'd never heard before, panic bleeding through every word as he demanded to know what I'd done. The shocking part wasn't just that he was calling. It was what he was saying. The accusations spilling out in a chaotic rush that made no sense until it suddenly made all the sense in the world. "Dad's not breathing right," he gasped. "He saw the news and now he's... Charlotte, what the hell did you do? What did you release?" And that's when I realized the clock hadn't just struck midnight on a new year. It had struck on something far bigger, something I'd been planning in absolute silence while they'd been busy erasing me. My company, Quantum Pulse, had just gone public with a valuation of $2.3 billion, and attached to that IPO announcement was an interview that would burn their world to the ground. I'd sent it to TechCrunch and Wired weeks ago, timed to release at the exact moment they'd be celebrating, thinking they'd won, thinking I'd just disappear quietly into whatever corner they'd assigned me. The interview had everything: emails, patents, recordings, proof that Ryan had tried to steal my work and claim it as his own, proof that my family had treated my innovation like their inheritance. But before I tell you exactly how I destroyed them with the truth, before I walk you through every calculated move that led to this moment of justice and karma, I need to take you back 3 years. The Carter family wasn't just wealthy. We were legacy. The kind of old money that comes with expectations thicker than blood and colder than any winter in Newport. My parents, Richard and Vivian Carter, ran Carter and Associates, a prestigious consulting firm that had been in the family for 3 generations, and they treated it like a sacred dynasty that demanded absolute loyalty and perfect appearances. Every charity gala, every country club dinner, every carefully orchestrated photo op was designed to maintain the image: polished, untouchable, superior. And Ryan? Ryan was the golden child, the heir apparent who could do no wrong, while I was just the daughter who tinkers with computers, dismissed and diminished at every family gathering like my work was some cute little hobby instead of actual groundbreaking research. I'd watch Ryan command the room at these events, shaking hands with investors and board members, delivering rehearsed lines about innovation and the future of Carter legacy, while knowing absolutely nothing about real innovation. The infidelity wasn't romantic. It was intellectual, professional, a betrayal of trust that cut deeper than any affair, because it was my own brother stealing my ideas and presenting them as his golden ticket to Dad's approval. Every time someone asked what I did, and I started to explain my work in medical AI, Mom would interrupt with a laugh and redirect. "Oh, Charlotte's very passionate about her little projects. Ryan, tell them about the Singapore deal." I'd stand there, humiliated, feeling my accomplishments evaporate in real time while they celebrated his mediocrity as genius. The family drama wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, insidious, the kind of emotional warfare that happens behind closed doors and polite smiles. Dad would forget to invite me to strategy meetings, then act surprised when I felt excluded. Mom would critique everything from my clothes to my career choices, always with that veneer of constructive concern that made me feel crazy for being hurt. And Ryan played his role perfectly. The supportive brother in public, the dismissive competitor in private, always positioning himself as the one who truly understood the family business, while I was just the outsider who didn't get how things work. They'd toast to family values at dinner while systematically erasing my value from the family narrative. But here's what they couldn't see through their champagne-fueled arrogance and their obsession with maintaining appearances. I was building something real, something that would outlive their precious reputation and their carefully curated Instagram feeds. While they played dress-up at charity auctions and networking brunches, I was at MIT working with actual innovators, developing an algorithm that could revolutionize predictive diagnostics in cardiology. I couldn't believe how much of my life I'd wasted seeking their approval, trying to prove I belonged at their table, when the truth was becoming devastatingly clear. I didn't want to belong there anymore. Their table was built on status and superficiality, and mine would be built on substance. The shocking realization hit me one night after a particularly brutal family dinner where Dad had introduced Ryan as the future of Carter innovation to a room full of potential investors I'd personally connected him with based on my research contacts. Ryan stood there accepting praise for his vision while I sat in the corner, invisible, my contributions attributed to him without a second thought. That's when I understood the full scope of the betrayal. This wasn't accidental exclusion or unconscious bias. This was systematic erasure, a family conspiracy to transfer my credibility to their chosen successor, because legacy mattered more than truth, and appearances mattered more than integrity. So I made a decision that night, one that would change everything and set the stage for what you already know happened on New Year's Eve. I stopped trying to be seen by them and started documenting everything, every conversation, every meeting, every time Ryan took my work and repackaged it as his own brilliance. I reached out to an intellectual property attorney I'd met at a conference, someone outside their circle of influence, who wouldn't be swayed by the Carter name or their old money connections. And I filed for patents on my algorithm, creating a legal fortress around my work that even Ryan's charm and Dad's connections couldn't penetrate, though I had no idea just how desperately they'd try. The algorithm wasn't just some tech experiment. It was 3 years of sleepless nights, failed attempts, breakthroughs that made me cry with relief, and collaboration with some of the brightest minds at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. We called it CardioPredict, and it could analyze patient data to predict cardiac events up to 18 months before traditional methods would catch them, potentially saving thousands of lives and revolutionizing preventive care. My team consisted of 2 PhD candidates, Dr. Elena Martinez from the Biomedical Engineering Department and a data scientist named James Chen, who'd left Google to work on something meaningful. This wasn't Ryan's corporate theater. This was real innovation, the kind that keeps you awake at night because you can't stop thinking about the possibilities, about the lives you might actually save. But even as we celebrated our breakthroughs in that cramped lab, even as the data proved our model worked better than anything currently on the market, I felt this gnawing anxiety I couldn't shake. I'd grown up watching my family operate, seeing how they appropriated ideas and claimed ownership through sheer force of presence and connections. The betrayal I'd witnessed over the years, watching Dad take credit for his team's work, seeing Mom manipulate narratives to suit her version of events, had taught me something valuable. Trust is a luxury, and documentation is survival. So before I even told my family what we were working on, before Ryan knew anything beyond Charlotte's doing some medical research thing, I went to see Marcus Webb, an IP attorney who specialized in protecting innovators from corporate theft. Marcus looked at my preliminary data and said something that still gives me chills. "Charlotte, this is potentially worth hundreds of millions. You need to lock this down yesterday. Patents, NDAs, everything. Because the moment word gets out, everyone's going to claim they helped you develop it." I couldn't believe how right he was, how prophetic that warning would become. We filed for patents immediately, documented every team meeting, created a paper trail that proved authorship beyond any reasonable doubt. I made Elena and James co-inventors on the patents, shared equity in what would become Quantum Pulse. Because unlike my family, I understood that real innovation is collaborative, and credit should flow to those who actually do the work, not those who just show up and demand recognition. The shocking part was how naturally the deception came to me, how easily I learned to smile at family dinners while hiding the most important project of my life from the people who were supposed to celebrate it with me. Every time Mom asked about my work, I'd give vague answers. Oh, just some diagnostic modeling, nothing major yet. Every time Ryan tried to probe for details with that fake brotherly interest, I'd redirect to his projects, stroke his ego, make him feel like the genius while I quietly built an empire he couldn't touch. This wasn't just protecting my work. This was protecting my dignity, my self-worth. Everything they'd tried to strip away over the years by treating my accomplishments like amusing distractions from the real family business. By the time we had our first successful clinical trial results, by the time hospitals started expressing serious interest and venture capitalists began circling, I'd created an unbreakable legal structure around CardioPredict. The patents were in my name and my team's names, not the Carter family's, not Ryan's, not anyone who thought they could claim ownership through genetics or intimidation. Marcus had drafted agreements so airtight that even Dad's corporate lawyers couldn't find loopholes. And I'd done it all in silence, in secret, because I'd learned the hard way that my family didn't deserve access to my victories until I'd made them undeniable and unbreakable. But here's what I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't have fully prepared for despite all my precautions and careful planning. I didn't realize that protecting my work would trigger such a vicious response from the people who were supposed to love me. I thought once they saw the patents, once the legal reality was undeniable, they'd be proud, or at least accepting. Instead, what happened next was a masterclass in family betrayal, a systematic attempt to strip away everything I'd built, disguised as concern and wrapped in the language of loyalty and tradition that would have been almost impressive if it wasn't so devastating. It started so innocently I almost didn't catch it. Ryan asking if he could sit in on one of my investor presentations, claiming he wanted to learn more about the tech sector and support his little sister. I should have known better, should have recognized the manipulation in his smile. But there's this stupid part of you that wants to believe your family might actually care. So I let him come to a meeting with a venture capital firm in Boston. And I watched in real time as he positioned himself not as my supporter, but as my handler, interrupting my explanations to clarify points I'd made perfectly clear, redirecting questions to himself like he was the project lead, and I was just the technical assistant who didn't understand the business implications of my own innovation. The infidelity of it, the sheer audacity, became clear when I started getting emails from investors addressing both of us as co-founders, even though I'd never used that language. Ryan had apparently followed up after meetings with his own communications, reframing CardioPredict as a Carter family venture and positioning himself as the business strategist behind my brilliant technical work. He'd taken my investor deck, modified it to include his name prominently, and started taking calls without me, making decisions about my company like he had any right to be involved. I couldn't believe the betrayal was happening so brazenly, that he'd smile at me over family dinners, while systematically stealing my credibility and my agency in rooms I wasn't even present for. Then came the NDA incident that should have been my final warning, the moment I should have burned every bridge and run. Ryan showed up at my apartment with Dad, both wearing their serious business faces, and presented me with a non-disclosure agreement that would essentially sign over all my work to Carter Innovation Holdings, a shell company they'd apparently created without my knowledge. "It's just to protect the family," Dad explained, in that patronizing tone he uses when he's already made the decision for you. "You're doing important work, Charlotte, but you're inexperienced in business. Let us handle the corporate structure while you focus on the science. This NDA ensures everything stays within the family, where it belongs, and protects all of us from potential litigation." The shocking part wasn't just the document itself. It was how they presented it as protection when it was actually theft. How they used the language of family loyalty to manipulate me into signing away my rights. Ryan sat there nodding along, playing the supportive brother, saying things like, "We just want what's best for you," and "This is how serious businesses operate," while knowing full well that this NDA would legally allow him to claim ownership of my algorithm. I was humiliated by my own naivety, by the fact that I'd almost signed it before Marcus called me back about an unrelated patent question, and I mentioned the NDA in passing. His response was immediate and terrifying. "Do not sign that under any circumstances. That's not protection, that's appropriation. They're trying to steal your company. So I refused, and that's when the mask came off completely, when I saw the real faces behind the family drama and the pretense of concern. Ryan's supportive demeanor evaporated instantly, replaced by cold fury that made him look exactly like our father in his worst moments. "You're making this so much harder than it needs to be," he hissed. "This is family property, Charlotte. You developed this using family resources, family connections, family name. You don't just get to take something that belongs to all of us and claim it's yours alone." The twisted logic was stunning. I'd built CardioPredict with MIT resources and my team's expertise. But because I was a Carter, because I carried their last name, they believed they owned my brain, my work, my future. The final confrontation happened in Dad's study 3 weeks before that New Year's Eve, and it's burned into my memory like a scar I'll carry forever. Ryan demanded I hand over the complete algorithm, the source code, all the clinical trial data, everything that made CardioPredict valuable. When I refused, when I reminded him about the patents and the legal protections Marcus had built, he actually laughed. This cruel sound that had nothing to do with humor. "You think some patents scare me? You think your little lawyer can go up against our resources? I will bury you in litigation until you have nothing left. Or you can be smart, be a team player, and let the people who actually know how to build companies take this to its full potential." That's when I realized the truth. They weren't just trying to steal my work. They genuinely believed they deserved it, that my value as a human being was subordinate to their ambitions and their legacy. The invitations stopped coming exactly 1 week after I refused to sign over my company. No more family dinners, no more charity galas, no more Sunday brunches at the estate that had been tradition since I was born. At first I thought maybe they were just busy, maybe I was being paranoid. But then Mom called with that sickeningly sweet voice she uses when she's about to destroy you and said, "Darling, your father and I think it's best if we have some space. You've been so stressed with your project, and we wouldn't want you to feel obligated to attend family events when you're clearly overwhelmed." The betrayal in those words was suffocating. They were erasing me from the family narrative and framing it as a favor, as concern for my well-being, when we both knew it was punishment for not surrendering. Ryan took it even further, blocking me from the family group chat and removing me from the email lists for Carter and Associates events where I'd been included for years. I'd see photos on Instagram of family gatherings I didn't know were happening, birthday celebrations, anniversary parties, even just casual dinners, and every single image was a deliberate message. You don't exist to us anymore. The humiliation wasn't just about missing events. It was about being systematically written out of my own history, watching them continue as if I'd never been part of the family at all. My cousins stopped responding to my texts. My aunt uninvited me from Thanksgiving. And suddenly I was the villain in a story I didn't even recognize, the difficult daughter who'd chosen her career over her family. But the most devastating moment came when I tried to attend my grandmother's birthday party. A woman I'd been close to my entire life, who'd always supported my education and my ambitions. I showed up at the estate with a gift I'd spent weeks choosing, something meaningful that connected to memories we'd shared. And Ryan met me at the door with this cold, practiced expression. "Charlotte, you weren't invited. Mom specifically said family only, and you made it clear you're not interested in being part of this family anymore." I couldn't believe he was actually blocking me from seeing my own grandmother, using her birthday as another weapon in their campaign to break me. The shame of standing there, being turned away like a stranger, while I could hear laughter and music inside, nearly destroyed me. Dad's role in all of this was somehow worse because it was passive, cowardly, the kind of betrayal that comes from silence rather than action. He never called to check on me, never questioned why his daughter was suddenly absent from every family event, never once stood up and said, "This is wrong." When I finally reached him on the phone after 3 weeks of being ghosted, his response was, "Charlotte, you're creating drama where there doesn't need to be any. Your mother says you make people uncomfortable with your attitude, and frankly, we're tired of walking on eggshells around you. Maybe when you're ready to apologize and be reasonable, we can revisit having you around." The shocking accusation that I was the problem, that my discomfort with being robbed was somehow an attitude issue, revealed everything about how they operated. What made the exclusion especially cruel was how calculated it was, how they'd clearly discussed and agreed upon this strategy to isolate me and force my compliance. This wasn't spontaneous anger or temporary frustration. This was a coordinated punishment designed to make me feel worthless and alone, until I had no choice but to surrender my company and my dignity to get back into their good graces. They were weaponizing my love for them, my desire to belong, my self-worth that had always been tangled up in their approval. Every day without contact was supposed to break me down a little more, supposed to make me desperate enough to sign whatever documents they wanted, to become the obedient daughter who understood her place. But here's what they fundamentally misunderstood about me, what their arrogance and their privilege made them incapable of seeing. Every day they excluded me, every invitation they withheld, every photo they posted without me. They weren't breaking me down. They were setting me free, severing the emotional chains I'd carried my entire life, the need for their validation that had kept me small and compliant. And while they were busy erasing me from their perfect family portrait, I was building something they could never touch, gathering evidence they didn't know existed, and planning a New Year's Eve revelation that would expose not just Ryan's theft, but the entire toxic system that had enabled it. The truth is, I'm a scientist. I was trained to document everything, to build cases based on evidence rather than emotion, and that training became my weapon when my family decided to wage war against me. Every email Ryan sent claiming my ideas as his own, every meeting where he presented my research as our family's innovation, every investor pitch where he positioned himself as the visionary, I saved it all, backed it up in 3 different cloud services, and created a timeline so detailed that no amount of gaslighting could contradict it. Marcus helped me understand that in battles like this, emotions don't matter. Only proof matters. And I had enough proof to bury them all under the weight of their own betrayal and lies. But I didn't just rely on my word against theirs, because I knew how family drama gets dismissed as he said, she said when there's money and reputation at stake. I reached out to Dr. Elena Martinez, my collaborator from MIT, and asked if she'd be willing to provide a formal statement confirming the timeline of our work and my role as the primary architect of CardioPredict. Her response was immediate and fierce. Charlotte, I've watched you build this from nothing. I've watched Ryan try to insert himself into your success. I will testify anywhere, anytime that this algorithm is yours and yours alone. Having an MIT professor with her credentials willing to verify my authorship added a layer of credibility that Ryan's charm and Dad's connections couldn't overcome. Then there was the NDA itself, the document they'd tried to manipulate me into signing, which Marcus analyzed and discovered was even worse than we'd initially thought. It contained clauses that would have not only transferred ownership of CardioPredict to Carter Innovation Holdings, but would have prevented me from working on similar projects for 5 years and required me to pay damages if I publicly disputed Ryan's role in the company. Marcus prepared a detailed legal brief explaining how the NDA violated intellectual property law and constituted attempted fraud, and he was ready to submit it to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office if they tried to enforce it. The shocking reality was that my family had been so confident in their power, so certain I'd just comply, that they'd left a paper trail of their own attempted theft. I took it even further, because I needed the public to understand this wasn't just a family squabble. This was a pattern of behavior that spoke to something larger about how innovation gets stolen from women, especially in tech. I contacted journalists at TechCrunch and Forbes who'd covered stories about intellectual property theft and founder disputes, and I walked them through everything. The patents with their filing dates, the emails showing Ryan claiming credit, the investor communications where he positioned himself as co-founder, Elena's testimony, Marcus's legal analysis, even recordings I'd made of conversations where Ryan explicitly demanded I hand over the algorithm. I gave them permission to verify every single claim, to contact anyone involved, because I knew that credibility would be everything when this story went public. The journalists did their homework beautifully. They reached out to the venture capital firms Ryan had pitched to. They examined the patent office records. They interviewed people from MIT who'd witnessed our work, and they fact-checked every detail until the story was bulletproof. What emerged wasn't just an article. It was a full investigative piece with supporting documentation, expert commentary, and a timeline that made Ryan's betrayal undeniable. but I made one specific request that the journalists honored. I wanted the story to publish at exactly midnight on New Year's Eve, while my family was celebrating their perfect life, while they thought they'd successfully erased me and gotten away with everything. The karma of that timing felt almost poetic. And the final piece of my revenge, the detail that would make this story explode beyond just tech industry news, was my decision to tie the IPO announcement to the exposé. Quantum Pulse was going public with a $2.3 billion valuation at the exact moment the truth about Ryan's attempted theft hit the internet, creating a narrative so compelling that every major news outlet would have to cover it. The invisible daughter who built $1 billion company while her family tried to steal it from her, who documented everything, who fought back with receipts instead of tears, and who chose New Year's Eve, the night they'd banned her from their celebration, to reveal everything. I'd spent 3 months coordinating with my PR team, my lawyers, and the journalists to ensure maximum impact. And now, as that clock ticked toward midnight, I wasn't nervous or scared. I was ready to watch their world burn. The first indication that my plan had detonated came at 12:01 a.m., when my phone started vibrating non-stop. Notifications flooding in so fast the screen couldn't keep up. Messages from colleagues and former classmates saying, "Holy shit, Charlotte, and did you really just do this?" Within minutes, the TechCrunch article was trending on Twitter, the Forbes piece was being shared across LinkedIn, and screenshots of Ryan's emails were going viral with captions like, "This is why women don't trust tech bros," and "The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze." Me, the justice of watching it spread in real time, watching strangers dissect my family's betrayal and side with me overwhelmingly, felt like vindication I didn't even know I needed until it was happening. But Ryan's response was what I'd been waiting for, what I knew would be his downfall because he'd spent his entire life getting away with charm instead of substance. He posted a thread on Twitter at 12:47 a.m. I'd clearly drunk from the New Year's celebration, attempting to deny everything. "These allegations are false and defamatory. My sister is struggling with mental health issues and has fabricated a narrative to justify her paranoia. I've always supported her work, and I'm heartbroken that she's chosen to attack our family publicly." I couldn't believe he actually played the mental health card, actually tried to gaslight me in front of millions of people who could literally read his emails claiming my work as his own. The internet tore him apart within minutes. Journalists started replying to his thread with receipts, screenshots of the timeline, links to the patent filings, Elena's statement, the investor pitch decks with his modifications. One tech reporter wrote, "Ryan, I have the email you sent to Sequoia Capital on March 15th, where you wrote, 'I've developed a revolutionary cardiac algorithm with zero mention of your sister. Would you like to explain that, or shall we discuss the 6 other similar emails?'" Watching him try to maintain the lie while evidence piled up against him was devastating and beautiful, like watching someone drown in their own arrogance. He deleted the thread 20 minutes later, but the internet is forever, and screenshots had already been saved and reshared thousands of times. The shocking part was how quickly the professional consequences materialized. By 3 a.m., 3 separate venture capital firms had issued statements distancing themselves from Ryan and requesting meetings with me directly to discuss their continued investment in Quantum Pulse. By morning, the board of Carter and Associates had called an emergency meeting and suspended Ryan pending an internal investigation into whether he'd misrepresented company resources or used the Carter name fraudulently in his dealings. LinkedIn was flooded with people removing endorsements from his profile, former colleagues posting their own stories about times Ryan had taken credit for their work, and business partners quietly severing ties to avoid the reputational damage of being associated with him. The backlash wasn't universal, though, and that's what made it feel real rather than like some fantasy revenge scenario. There were people defending him, calling me vindictive and opportunistic, suggesting I was exaggerating, or that this was just typical family drama blown out of proportion. Some comments said things like, "She clearly wanted attention and used her brother as a stepping stone," or "Timing this with the IPO proves it's all about money and publicity, not justice." Those comments stung, I won't lie, but they were vastly outnumbered by the support, and more importantly, they didn't change the facts. The truth stood independent of public opinion, documented and verified, and no amount of victim blaming could erase the paper trail. By the time the sun rose on January 1st, Ryan had gone completely silent on social media. The Carter family's Instagram accounts had been set to private, and my phone was ringing nonstop with interview requests, partnership opportunities, and messages from other women in tech sharing their own stories of family betrayal and stolen credit. What I'd thought would be a personal victory, a private payback for years of humiliation, had become something larger. A conversation about intellectual property, about family dynamics and power, about how innovation gets appropriated and who gets believed. And at the center of it all was Ryan, imploding in real time, watching his carefully constructed image crumble, while I watched from my tiny Boston apartment, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, powerful, vindicated, and utterly, completely free from needing their approval. Just when I thought the story had reached its peak, when Ryan's public collapse felt like enough justice for everything he'd done, something even more damning surfaced on January 3rd. An anonymous source, later revealed to be a former assistant at Carter & Associates who'd been laid off and had nothing left to lose, leaked an internal pitch deck to The Verge that made everything so much worse. The deck, dated 8 months before my IPO, showed Ryan presenting CardioPredict to a Chinese medical device company called MedTech Solutions, offering to license the algorithm for $80 million in exchange for equity in their subsidiary. He'd literally tried to sell my work to a foreign corporation without my knowledge, without my consent, treating my innovation like it was his personal asset to auction off to the highest bidder. The betrayal wasn't just familial anymore. This was actual fraud, corporate espionage, a crime that could carry serious legal consequences beyond damaged reputation and lost business relationships. The pitch deck included technical specifications he could have only obtained by hacking into my research files or convincing someone on my team to leak them, and it positioned him as the sole inventor with full authority to negotiate licensing deals. I couldn't believe the depth of his deception, couldn't process that my own brother had been willing to not just steal credit, but to literally profit from selling something that wasn't his. Marcus immediately flagged it to federal authorities and filed additional legal motions, while the internet exploded with a new wave of outrage that made the initial response look tame. What made this revelation particularly shocking was the collateral damage it created. Damage I hadn't fully anticipated when I started this war. Damage that kept me awake at night, even as I celebrated Ryan's downfall. Carter & Associates employed 200 people, most of them innocent workers who had nothing to do with Ryan's schemes or my family's dysfunction. When the investigation expanded and major clients started pulling their contracts, citing reputational concerns and ethical violations, those jobs became vulnerable. I started seeing LinkedIn posts from former colleagues saying things like, 20 years at this company and now I might lose everything because the founder's son is a fraud. The karma I'd sought was hitting people who didn't deserve it. And that moral weight was something I hadn't fully prepared to carry. Online, the conversation split even further. Some people praised me for exposing corruption regardless of consequences, arguing that companies built on fraud deserve to fail, and that protecting guilty parties only enables more harm. Others accused me of being reckless and vindictive, saying I'd destroyed livelihoods out of spite, and that I could have handled this privately instead of making it a public spectacle. One viral tweet said, "Charlotte Carter had every right to expose her brother, but tanking a 200-person company to do it? That's not justice. That's revenge without regard for innocent people." Reading that made me question everything. Had I gone too far? Was I responsible for protecting people who worked for a company that had enabled Ryan's behavior? But then the evidence kept coming, and it became clear that this wasn't about one bad apple or one family's dysfunction. This was systemic rot that went deeper than I'd even known. More leaks revealed that Dad had known about Ryan's attempt to sell CardioPredict to MedTech Solutions and had done nothing to stop it, had actually connected Ryan with their CEO through his business networks. Emails showed Mom coordinating with their PR team about how to manage the Charlotte situation if the theft ever came to light, discussing strategies to paint me as unstable or greedy. The entire family had been complicit, had seen what Ryan was doing and chosen to support it, because protecting legacy mattered more than protecting truth or integrity. The weight of what I'd uncovered shifted from personal vendetta to public interest. This wasn't just about me getting revenge on my family drama anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of corruption that had implications beyond our relationship. And as the investigation deepened, as more evidence surfaced and authorities got involved, I realized that the consequences spreading through Carter and Associates weren't my fault. They were the natural result of leadership that had built their empire on fraud and entitlement. The innocent employees deserved better than to work for people like my family. And maybe, just maybe, the painful collapse of Carter and Associates would create space for something more honest to emerge. Even if navigating that moral complexity made me feel less victorious and more exhausted than I'd ever imagined. Mom made her move on January 7th, exactly 1 week after the explosion, and it was so perfectly calculated that I almost admired the strategic precision of it. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. No call, no text. Just appeared at my door in her Burberry coat and perfect makeup like she was attending a charity luncheon instead of confronting the daughter she'd systematically erased. "Charlotte, darling, we need to talk about fixing this," she said, walking past me without waiting for an invitation. Her tone suggesting that the entire scandal was a minor misunderstanding that reasonable people could resolve over tea. The audacity of her presence in my space, acting like nothing had fundamentally changed between us, made my blood pressure spike instantly. She didn't waste time with apologies or acknowledgement of what they'd done. That would have required admitting fault. And Vivian Carter doesn't do fault. Instead, she went straight to negotiation mode, pulling out a folder with documents her lawyers had prepared, a proposed public statement where I'd claim the exposé was exaggerated due to emotional stress, a settlement offer of $50 million in exchange for my silence and cooperation in rebuilding the family image, and a media strategy that involved us appearing together at charity events to demonstrate reconciliation. "The board is willing to make Ryan step down temporarily," she explained, like this was a generous concession rather than the bare minimum consequence for attempted fraud. "But we need you to issue a retraction, or at least a softening of your claims. The family name is being destroyed, Charlotte, and that affects all of us, including you." I couldn't believe she actually thought I'd sell out after everything, that she could quantify my dignity with a dollar amount and expect me to perform forgiveness for the sake of their social standing. "This isn't about money, Mom," I said, my voice shaking with rage I'd been holding back for years. "This is about the truth. Ryan tried to steal my company. Dad enabled it. You orchestrated my exclusion to force my compliance. Those aren't allegations. They're documented facts. And you want me to lie about it to save your reputation at the country club?" Her face tightened. That subtle shift that happens when Vivian Carter realizes she's not getting her way. When manipulation isn't working, and she has to reveal the threat beneath the politeness. "You're being incredibly selfish," she said, her voice dropping to that cold register that used to terrify me as a child. "You have your company, your success, your billions. What more do you want? Vengeance? To watch your brother lose everything? To see 200 people lose their jobs because you couldn't handle family business privately? This humiliation you've created affects everyone, Charlotte. Your grandmother is devastated, your cousins are being harassed online, and your father," she paused for effect, weaponizing concern. "Your father's heart condition is worsening from the stress. If something happens to him, that blood is on your hands. All we're asking is that you show some compassion, some loyalty to the people who raised you and gave you every advantage you've ever had." The manipulation was so textbook, so precisely calculated to trigger guilt and shame, that I almost laughed at how predictable she'd become. She was trying to reframe Ryan's fraud as my cruelty, trying to make me responsible for Dad's health and the company's implosion and the family's social embarrassment, as if I'd created this situation, rather than simply refusing to be complicit in it. "You gave me advantages?" I said, standing up so she'd know this conversation was ending. "You gave me a front row seat to watch Ryan steal credit for my work while you applauded. You taught me that my value was decorative, that my accomplishments only mattered if they enhanced the Carter brand. And when I dared to protect what was mine, you erased me like I'd never existed and called it space." She stood too, gathering her folder with sharp, angry movements that betrayed the fury beneath her composed exterior. "You'll regret this, Charlotte. You think you've won, but you've just made yourself an enemy of your own family. When your company faces challenges, when you need connections or support, or simply someone to call when things get difficult, you'll remember that you chose pride over family, and we won't be there." The threat was clear, the promise of permanent exile delivered with icy finality, and I felt something inside me settle into absolute certainty. "Good," I said, opening the door for her to leave, "because I don't want people in my life who only show up when I'm useful or compliant. I'm done performing reconciliation to maintain your peace. I'm done disappearing to make you comfortable. And I'm definitely done negotiating my integrity to protect people who never once protected me." The weeks after Mom's failed negotiation brought a clarity I hadn't experienced in my entire life, like I'd been living underwater for 29 years, and finally broke through to the surface where I could breathe. I stopped checking my family's social media, stopped waiting for Dad's apology that would never come, stopped hoping Ryan would somehow acknowledge what he'd done. The betrayal had happened, the truth was public, and my healing didn't require their participation or their validation. I focused on Quantum Pulse, on my team, on the hospitals already implementing CardioPredict in clinical trials, and I discovered something shocking. I was happier without them than I'd ever been trying to earn their love. Then, in late January, something unexpected happened that shifted the entire narrative from personal vendetta to meaningful legacy. I received an email from Women in Tech Summit, one of the most prestigious conferences in the industry, inviting me to deliver the keynote address about my experience with intellectual property theft and family dynamics in entrepreneurship. "Your story has resonated with thousands of women who've had their innovations stolen or diminished by family members, partners, or colleagues," the email read. "We'd be honored if you'd share your journey and talk about how documentation, legal protection, and self-advocacy can empower other founders facing similar challenges." I couldn't believe that my family drama had become something larger, something that could actually help other people navigate their own battles. Preparing that keynote forced me to process everything that had happened, not just the revenge and the justice, but the deeper lesson about self-worth and boundaries that I'd learned through devastation. I wrote about how betrayal teaches you who people really are when your success threatens their narrative, how family can be the most dangerous place when it's built on hierarchy, rather than genuine love. I talked about the difference between reconciliation and capitulation, about how true healing sometimes means accepting that some relationships are too toxic to repair, and that walking away isn't failure, it's dignity. The speech wasn't about hating my family. It was about choosing myself after years of making myself smaller to fit into their world. The response to that keynote was overwhelming in ways that made the IPO and the exposé feel almost small by comparison. Women reached out from all over the world sharing stories of brothers who'd stolen their business ideas, fathers who'd dismissed their patents, husbands who'd claimed credit for their innovations. Thousands of variations on the same fundamental betrayal I'd experienced. Some had fought back like I did. Others were still trapped in the manipulation, afraid to document or expose because family loyalty felt more important than truth. I started doing smaller talks, consulting with IP attorneys to create resources for protecting innovation, and eventually launched a mentorship program specifically for women navigating family-owned businesses or family partnerships where power dynamics created vulnerability. My relationship with my family settled into permanent distance, punctuated by occasional, stilted communication. Dad sent an email 6 months after everything imploded. Not quite an apology, more of an acknowledgement that mistakes were made on both sides, and that he wished things could have been handled differently. He offered me a consulting position at Carter & Associates, which had survived the scandal in diminished form, as if a job title could repair years of systematic erasure and betrayal. I declined politely but firmly, explaining that I'd built something of my own and had no interest in returning to a system that had never valued me. Ryan never contacted me at all, his silence speaking louder than any apology could have, his pride apparently more durable than his capacity for genuine remorse. But here's what I learned through all of it. What I want anyone watching this to understand if they're facing their own version of family betrayal or stolen credit or systematic dismissal. Healing doesn't require reconciliation with the people who hurt you. Justice doesn't always look like courtroom victories or public apologies. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to disappear, documenting your truth, protecting your work, and building a life so authentic and successful that their absence from it becomes irrelevant. I chose integrity over inheritance, evidence over emotion, and my own dignity over their comfort. And that choice didn't just save my company. It saved me from spending the rest of my life seeking approval from people who were never capable of giving it. The family I've built now, my team, my mentees, the community of women who fought similar battles, that's the legacy that matters, and it's one they can never take away. So there you have it, the full story of how I went from the invisible daughter banned from New Year's Eve to the billionaire founder who exposed her family's betrayal with receipts they couldn't deny. But here's what I really want to know. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you had family members steal your ideas, take credit for your work, or try to erase you when you refuse to play along with their narrative? Drop a comment below and tell me your story, because I know I'm not alone in this, and neither are you. And here's the deeper question that keeps me up at night. Do you think I went too far? Was exposing everything publicly the right move? Or should I have handled this privately to protect the innocent people who worked at the family company? I wrestle with that moral complexity every day, and I'd love to hear your perspective. Where do you draw the line between justice and revenge? Between protecting yourself and causing collateral damage? Between family loyalty and personal integrity? If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever had someone close to you backstab you and then gaslight you about it, if you've ever chosen your dignity over someone else's comfort and paid the price for it, comment below and share what happened. How did you handle it? Did you fight back or walk away? Do you have regrets, or do you sleep better knowing you stood up for yourself? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now to know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and they're not wrong for refusing to disappear. And let me ask you this. If you were in my position, with all the evidence and all the power to expose the truth, would you have done it? Would you have published everything on New Year's Eve knowing it would implode your family's reputation and potentially hurt innocent people? Or would you have taken the settlement, stayed quiet, and let them get away with it to keep the peace? I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this, because the comments on my story have been so divided, and I think that tension reveals something important about how we think about family, loyalty, and justice. Before you go, I want to say this. If my story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about boundaries, or documentation, or the cost of seeking approval from people who don't deserve it, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. I share stories like this regularly, stories about betrayal and justice, and reclaiming your power when people try to diminish you. And I promise every single one will make you think, feel, and question the narratives you've been told about loyalty and family and what you owe to people who hurt you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights and experiences add so much depth to these conversations. Let's build a community of people who refuse to stay silent, who document the truth, who choose integrity even when it costs them everything familiar. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep having these provocative, uncomfortable, necessary conversations about what real justice looks like and whether revenge and healing can ever coexist. I'll see you in the next story.